Ooh, hang on. It's a bit hard. There's heaps of faces on my screen. It's a bit hard. Hang on. Thank you. Sorry. So my name's Jared, and I'm a developer here at Easy Agile. And tonight we were going to have Ungard speak, but he was sick, unfortunately. So I whipped this together at the last minute. So I apologise, but it's just a little talk about some frameworks I've been playing with, and I kind of think this is the goal. This is like the good thing about Siligong is people getting up and just talking about stuff they've been playing with. Like you don't have to be an expert at something. I'm certainly not an expert at this stuff. This is just stuff I've been playing with, and I think people are quite intimidated doing talks. So if you're just playing with something and you think it's cool, by all means get up and do a talk like this one. And this is my friend James, and he hates React and he hates Agile. And that's kind of good that he's probably good that he's not here. It's actually a high school friend that I've reconnected with on Discord. And it's been like, I don't know, 20 years since high school. And he hates React and he hates Agile. And I asked him to give me like 5 words for the presentation about what's wrong with React, and he's like gave me like 5 paragraphs about it, and yeah. But anyway, he's always using cool, weird frameworks, and I was working on this hobby project. I said, James has already shown me these frameworks, these weird ones, and I'm like, oh, I'll try one of these weird new frameworks. So I did, and I'm going to talk about them tonight, and they're Mithril.js and BSS. So has anybody used either of those? Besides Yossi, you've used Mithril, or we discussed earlier, you know about it? I'm kind of hoping no one knows anything about it, so I can kind of say whatever I want. So Mithril is not a baby framework. It does have like 6,500 stars on GitHub, so it's not like people use it. It's not like React with 9.8 million stars, so it is a little framework. You wouldn't get anybody applying for jobs if you advertised Mithril.js as your framework, but what is it? It's one of these front-end frameworks like Vue or Angular or React or whatever. Like it's a batteries included framework, so it includes routing and it includes an XHR module for doing web requests. And the philosophy behind Mithril is that it's super small and super fast and super simple. It kind of looks like React. So you can see the top component is called Hyperscript. I'm kind of getting used to reading it and writing it, but you can also use JSX, like at the bottom, that's a Mithril component. Kind of looks like a React component if you're familiar with React, but it's much simpler than React. So here's a little dummy component that you've probably seen something similar in examples for lots of things. It's like you click on the div and the count goes up. I miss the curly braces and stuff because I haven't actually run this, I just typed it in there. But you'll notice that the state is just this local variable inside the component. So let count equals 0, and then the click handler adds 1 to it. And there's no set state, and there's no there's no use state hooks, and there's no, like, how does the library know that variable is changing and then it needs to re-render? Oh, it's magic. And the answer is that it always re-renders everything. So if you're familiar with React, and I apologize if this is a very React kind of heavy talk, so if you're not familiar with React, I apologize. But React has this kind of two-phase optimization approach to rendering. So first, it calls all the render methods for all the components in your tree. And then that generates a big virtual DOM, and then it diffs the virtual DOM to work out what needs to change in the real DOM. It does all this complex optimization to work out, to not call render, like to optimize not calling render. React does. So it compares props it compares that props from the old component are equal to the new component with reference equality. It compares that the state has changed. And Mithril, like, it's philosophically different. It calls render for everything. It still does the virtual DOM and the diffing, but it calls render for everything. And the idea is that your render should be fast, and it's the virtual DOM diffing that makes it performant. So then you ask, well, when does it render? Because if Mithril doesn't know about your props and your state to trigger re-renders, so when does it re-render? It's not just re-rendering all the time. And the answer is it renders on route changes, event handlers. So after an on-click, it re-renders the whole DOM. After a web request, it re-renders the whole DOM. And you kind of find that actually covers almost everything. Like, it's always in an event handler somewhere in the stack that you're actually changing a bit of state, or it's on a route change, or it's after a web request. And it's really rare that something changed outside of that context that you need to cause a re-render. And in those cases, you can just re-render manually. And the philosophy is all about performance by running less code rather than implementing complex optimizations. So instead of having all that prop diffing and fibers and all that complicated stuff React does, it's like, we just call render, make it fast. If you want to opt out, you can opt out. But the code for the library is super small. And you can, this is a bit of marketing copy from the Mithril website, but you can, in the time it takes just to parse the React JavaScript in your bundle, Mithril's already parsed, initialized, and processed 20,000 DOM nodes. Another philosophy of Mithril is to not abstract away the DOM, and touching the DOM in React is a bit of a kind of bad anti-pattern thing. Like, you're encouraged not to do it. You've got to do a use ref, and then you put a ref on the element, and then you've got to do a use effect and get your dependencies right, and then a cleanup thing, and just inside that use effect you can poke at the DOM, and it's kind of discouraged. But in Mithril, it's like the encouraged idiomatic way of doing things, which is kind of interesting and different. So this is an example of a Mithril component with a bunch of the lifecycle methods. So these are called, like, when components are added or updated or removed. And inside that vnode argument is the DOM, and you can just access it. And where it really shines is doing animations. Like, this is where I thought, gee, this is a cool pattern. So I don't know if you've ever tried to do exit animations in React. Say you've got a message in some state and you want it to slide off the screen when the message is deleted. It's really challenging in React because it's like, oh, you set the state to null and then you want the message to slide off the screen, but the message is already gone. So you don't have a component anymore to slide off the screen. So what do? You set like another property like is deleting message and a timeout for 3 seconds to actually set that back to false and message. Like, it's a pain. In Mithril, you've got this on before remove lifecycle method, and Mithril will call that lifecycle method before removing an element from the DOM, and it won't delete it from the DOM until that method returns and resolves. So it's really simple to just go on when something's getting removed, add a class to it, and that class is just some CSS transition to slide out, and then add an event listener to that DOM element when the animation ends, return. So it's like super clean. You just delete the message and then that will make it slide off the screen. It's really cool. The next little library I had a look at is called BSS, which is Better Style Sheets. This one only has 80 stars on GitHub, so I don't think anybody will have heard of this. It's very obscure. And I asked that friend James, I'm like, James, you got to tell me, I'm doing a talk about this. Give me the pitch on BSS. Why would you use it over emotion? Because I had a look at emotion as well, just like compare it. He's like, just use emotion. It's better. Because like it's like a few kilobytes different and like nobody uses it. But anyway, I used it. It looks like every other CSS in JS library you've ever used. You have like these template strings. It has this really, that white box, this really kind of, I think it's pretty shitty way of like acronym like shorthand to define styles. The one thing that it's designed to work with Mithril though, so that's kind of the only reason you might use it, is this box class here is actually a string that is dot class name, and Mithril supports rendering an element like div dot class name to give it the class. So it's really nice to use with Mithril. It's the only reason you might use it. One cool thing is that it's really small. So I went on GitHub and read the code for it. It's like a 300-line file, and you can just, like, I have no idea what styled components does, but I read the code for this, and it's like, it's something that's powerful being able to read the whole library you're using and fully understand it. It's really easy. It's like, you call that B, and it's like, is there a style element yet in the head? No, add it. Make a string with that in it and put it in the style with a class name and return it. Like, it's really basic. And I guess, what's the point? Like, what's the point of all these mini libraries? And like, what did I learn out of playing with them? And I think the takeaway for me was the dev feedback speed, like the dev loop. And you lose track of how crap it's gotten in the front end. And in, like, here at Easy Agile, it takes, a production build takes minutes of Webpack. And the first time you run Webpack takes, 40 seconds or something. And you make a change and it takes 10 seconds before you get feedback in the browser. And it's kind of, this is a full production build of my little hobby app. And it took 290 milliseconds to do a full optimized, minified production build. And it's like, when I was working on this project, it's like you change a few characters in the text for one of the elements, and before you can like move your eyes to the other window where the browser is, it's done a full page refresh, loaded everything and changed, and like you can't even see it refresh because it's that quick, and it's a game changer. Like, I read this blog post about orders of magnitude changes in your dev feedback loop. So going from things that take a second to a millisecond or a minute to a second, and how it just completely changes the game. When you go from something taking minutes to milliseconds, you can run it on every key press rather than on every 10 minutes. It's cool. So what did I build with this library? It's kind of a bit of a tangent. I don't want to be too political at Siligong, but I built this Scott Morrison simulator. And I played this mobile game where it's called Reigns on mobile, and you're a leader, and you've got to make these advisors come to you, and they say, there's enemies at the gate. Do you want to send the army or not? You say yes or no. And then, depending on what you choose, these meters go up and down. And if you do well, if you empty any of the meters, you get cooed, basically. I thought that would be cool game mechanic to make a Scott Morrison simulator. So I did. And like, it asks you if you want to go to Engadine McDonald's after the Sharkies win the grand final. And it was all a lot of fun. I'm totally too scared to actually release it because I don't want to get sued. You're welcome to go to the URL and play with it. Just don't tweet it or anything. And the animations are cool because Mithril is good at that. The end. Thank you. Any questions? I have not. Is it? Have you used Mithril?
No. Well, that's all I think. And it has input animations and stuff as well. And it looks really fast. And it all pictures it.
Animations like jQuery style?